Figuring out how much essential oil you need to use in a syrup or a soda is quite easy if you know where to look. And luckily you're in the right place, because that's what I'm going to show you today. There's lots of guidance out there on the maximum usage rates of pretty much all the essential oils that are edible. And if you want to use that information, it requires some simple calculations. And if you're not into math, I've created a form that will do all the calculations for you. So if you're interested in making your own sodas, cocktails, beverages, and opening up a whole new world of flavors, stick around because I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm Darcy O'Neill, this is Art of Drink, and today we're talking about basically measuring essential oils and getting them in a level that is safe for people to use or drink and consume. And how do we do that? Now, often I think this is a hurdle for a lot of people, is doing the measurements, and obviously a lot of people don't like math, so any of the calculations people seem to avoid, which prevents them from having this really interesting world of ingredients to work with. So I've made it easy. I'm going to show you the calculations, but if you don't like math, as I said, I've created a form where all you have to do is punch in some basic numbers like the volume of your essential oil, the volume of your syrup, and it will actually calculate the parts per million for you. Now, speaking of parts per million, that is the unit that the FDA and the Flavor and Extract Manufacturers Association use, and it's a good unit to use. Most people don't really understand what a part per million is. When I was studying chemistry, we were told it was a teaspoon per Olympic-sized pool. Now, that's not a great visual, so I will show you what a part per million is, and it's actually a milligram per liter. So this being a 1 liter bottle, you'd add 1 milligram to that, but we'll talk about that in a bit. First, we need to know where to find the information on essential oils and how much we can use in a drink or a syrup. So for example, cassia oil, how much would you use? Most people don't know. So I'm going to show you exactly where to find that information. So let me grab my computer here. And it is fairly simple. I'll put a link below, but it's actually the Flavor Extracts Manufacturing Association. And once you get there, you'll be able to pull up this document. Basically a big table of all the essential oils that are GRAS, are generally recognized as safe, and their average maximum usage rates. Now, this isn't to tell you that this is the maximum usage rate. You know, there's some leeway. You can use a little more, you can double it up, because these levels are really low. They're in the 50 parts per million for most of them. So I will take you on a little adventure here. We'll go through some of this stuff. I'll just give you some examples on how to look it up. And it actually has a whole column dedicated to beverages. And then if it was used in alcoholic beverages, it's got a separate section for that, all in the same document. So now when you open up this PDF document and you go to page 7, at the top you'll see it's the average maximum uses in ppm. And then what you'll see is below that you'll see the start of a table. And on the left-hand side is the substance or the essential oil or whatever you're looking for. It can be an extract or it could be the whole herb. Third column, you'll see the title Beverages. Now, and then on the far right, you'll see other category. Those are the only 3 columns we're going to use. Don't confuse the chewing gum column, the amount in there, because nobody eats a liter of chewing gum. So you'll see the usage rates are really high under that one. Do not use those. Stick to the beverage and the other category if it lists an alcoholic name. So now if you go to page 16, we're going to see cassia. Now there's multiple things for cassia here. There's the bark extract. So when you see cassia, think of a cinnamon stick, not true cinnamon, but the other cinnamon. It's more of a heavy bark as opposed to a papery bark. So you'll see cassia just listed as that, and that's what they're talking about there. And it's used at 9 parts per million in beverages. If you go to the extract, one below that, you'll see that it's used at 310 parts per million. But the one we're really looking for is cassia bark oil, which is used at 3 parts per million. Now, this is just an average max. This does not mean you can't use more. It's just kind of the average in the 1960s. But if we go down to another example, we'll go to page 29, we'll see juniper, and there's juniper berries, juniper extract, and juniper oil. For our purposes, or at least the purpose of this video, we're mostly talking about juniper oil, or any of the oils. But you can use extracts if you want. A good one's gentian extract because you're not going to find a gentian oil. Again, you can use extracts in this, but they are different. You don't want to confuse the higher usage rates of some extracts to the oil. When you identify these things, make sure you're picking out the oil. But when you see juniper oil, you'll see in the beverage column it's 53 parts per million. But if you go all the way over to the right, you'll see alcoholic beverages, and it's used at 95 parts per million. So an alcoholic beverage is obviously gin. So that's kind of the average maximum usage rate. Again, you can go a little bit higher, 95 parts per million, equivalent to 2 metric drop. And then if you want to go even down a page, you're going to get into lemon and lime oil. So now lemon oil is kind of the one that you're going to get your highest usage rate. They're looking, in this one, it's 230 parts per million. When you see terpene lists, that means that you can use a lot less of it because they take out the stuff that's not soluble. But you can actually buy terpene-less lemon oil and lime oil. Most citrus oils come that way. So sometimes they're called 5-fold or 10-fold oils, and if you buy those, they're easier to get into solutions. Lime oil's at 130 parts per million, and you'll see different rates, but generally you want to be in that range. I mean, with lime oil, you could easily double it and still be safe. It'll be more intense. And when we do the calculations, I'm going to explain why you would want to double it. And it really has to do with making a syrup that's more flavorful and using less of it so you don't make your drink too sweet. And as you scroll through this, you'll find all sorts of, basically all the different ingredients, whether they're an essential oil, herb, or an extract. You'll also find chemicals, sugars, acids, and their usage rates, again, average usage rates, and anything with an asterisk on the side. So when you look at the name, if it has an asterisk, that's basically, in this document, they call it the FDA whitelist. And that means it's just a fully safe ingredient to use at these levels. There's no concerns and if it doesn't have an asterisk, it's still grass, because this is all generally recognized as safe, but again, they may have less data on it. You can cruise through this document and look at all sorts of different things. So if you just randomly pick an essential oil, so if I were to grab one from my list and we were to pick sandalwood, we could just go through this document, and then on page 45 they'll have sandalwood listed. It's sandalwood yellow oil, and it's used at 2.4 parts per million in beverages. So when you're formulating your own syrups, consider this your formulation Bible. This is what's going to give you the starting point guidance. Again, it shouldn't limit you. You shouldn't need to say, oh, I can't go above this. You can go above it a little bit. You do not want to get above 150 parts per million other than citrus oils. Almost everything is well below that, whether you're using an individual oil or if you're combining oils. Now, if you're combining oils, again, I have a form that will help you. You can put in all the different oils, and then it will calculate out the parts per million for the finished drink. But we'll talk about that in a second. If you're looking for anything on this and you can't find it, then you'll need to go to the Flavours website and punch it in. They update the document every 2 years, but it's a separate, 3 or 4 page, maybe 10-page document, depending on how many new ingredients they get. But this primary document is where you're going to find almost everything. Now that we've talked a lot about parts per million, let me explain what a part per million is, because I think it's a bit of a nebulous term. Often people don't understand it. This is a 2-digit scale, and that means it will read a gram as 1.00 grams. Now, it's always good to get a standard set of weights. They're not expensive, but my balance here is reading right on at 1.00 grams. But these things, they're pretty accurate. This is only about $30. They're pretty accurate, but they're not necessarily as accurate as a 3 or 4 digit balance, but it's going to give you an idea. So if we were to take a ibuprofen tablet, and this is a 400 milligram ibuprofen tablet, that's 400 milligrams of medicine, but they have binders and coatings in it. It comes to basically 490 milligrams. So the size of this tablet is 490 milligrams, and that is on a Canadian quarter, same size as an American quarter. Now, if we take this small tablet that I found, It's coming out at 150 milligrams, which is 0.15 grams. So this is kind of a little bit more than the total amount of juniper oil we would want to use. Now, if you want to know something even smaller, these little things, it's hard to read on the scale. So often if you're trying to read like many small things, it's easier to measure out 10 of them. Let's see if I can get this on here without them all. So if we put 10 of them on the balance, we're going to get about 300 milligrams for 10. So that means each one is 30 milligrams. Whenever you're thinking about a 30 milligram final amount, it is that amount. And that's a very tiny amount. When we're talking about milligrams, this is what you're looking at per liter. When you put this in your final drink, so if that is a 30 ppm final drink, that's what you're looking at for essential oils. Then you fill this up with, obviously, your soda water. So how do we calculate that? And that's what I'm going to show you next. So let's talk a little bit about math. Now, it's not difficult, but if you don't like math and you've never used the metric system because you're in the United States and you use freedom units, then this can seem a little problematic, but it's not that hard. And for anybody who finds math particularly hard, I do have the form that I developed. You just have to go to the Patreon link below. And I have a form where you can just enter all the data, the volumes basically, and it will calculate out your parts per million. However, if you want to do it manually, you can. This is the way to do it. And I do recommend you stick around for this part, even if it's just to see how the dilutions work and to understand it. It'll make you a better formulator when it comes to making your own syrups. So a couple things you need to know. The first is that if I say 1 part per million, that equals 1 milligram per liter. If I say 47 milligrams per liter, that equals 47 parts per million. So a part per million and a milligram per liter are the same thing. So they're interchangeable units. And the other one thing you should probably note if you don't use the metric system is that 1,000 milliliters equals 1 liter. So I'll show you the dilutions. It's really simple. So what we're going to do is we're just going to basically start off with 4 containers. And in the first one is our concentrated essential oil. So obviously at 100%, it's too strong. So we're going to take a sample of it and we're going to put it into some ethanol water mixture or solvent, and that is going to create an essence. And then we're going to take some of that essence and we're going to put it into some syrup, and that's going to give us our flavor syrup. And then, as all bartenders know, you take your syrup and you put it in your final drink, and obviously we have a drink. So that's just a simple dilution. Now the question is, how much of each do we put in there? And if you've watched my previous video on how to make a essence, it's basically this. So we're going to start off here in step 1, and we're going to take 50 grams of our essential oil, and we're going to put it in 1 liter of our solvent, so ethanol, water, whatever we're using as a solvent. Now 50 grams is 50,000 milligrams, so 1 gram is 1,000 milligrams. So 50 grams is 50,000. And that in 1 liter, so that's 50,000 milligrams per liter. That's 50,000 ppm. So there's your first solution. That's not too hard. So as long as if you weigh things out in grams, very few scales are going to weigh something out in milligrams. You need a pretty accurate scale, and usually do grams and then a decimal place. So You can weigh this out. If you do volume, and the form I have is set up for volume just because not everybody has a balance that can accurately weigh out oils, and you do want a multi-digit, a fairly accurate balance. But if you're using like a graduated cylinder or a beaker, the form will actually do the density conversion for you. And the reason you do a density conversion is that, again, your calculations can be off by about 20%, 25% in the two far ends if you're just not factoring in density. However, weight, you don't need to factor in anything. So if you have a scale that can do it, weigh it out. If not, the form will handle your density calculations for you. So now that we have our essence, we're going to make a syrup. So this part right there. And it's pretty simple. We're just going to take 20 mils of our essence, and we're going to make 2,000 milliliters of syrup. The one thing we need to do is we need to take this number here, the concentration. So this tells us how many milligrams of essential oil is in a liter. And so if we tack that on here, so we multiply it by we're going to get 500 milligrams per liter. So if you've ever done math, this unit will cross this unit out, and then you're left with milligrams per liter. So 20 divided by 2,000 is 0.01. And then when you multiply that by 50,000, you get 500. So again, 500 ppm. Now that is still a little strong. Again, we're targeting, let's say 50 ppm. So we're going to take 25 mils. So actually, let's make our drink. So we're going to take 25 mils of syrup, and we're going to make a 250 mil, which is roughly 8 ounces. Roughly, it's just slightly larger than 8 ounces. Soda. And again, just like the first time, where we take this number and we bring it here, we're going to bring this number here. So this number here. And we're going to take, 500 milligrams per liter. Now when we do the math, you're going to end up with 50 milligrams per liter, or 500 50 ppm. So that's how you can tell that's the number we're looking for. So it's within the range. And it doesn't matter what oil you use here when you weigh it, but if this was volume, so 500 mils or 50 mils, you would actually have to do a calculation at the end. And density, if you were to take all the oils and average out the density, it would be 0.9. And you just multiply this number, if this started off in mils, by this number, you can actually get each individual number for density for each oil, like orange oil. Very few of them are heavier than water. Wintergreen is, cinnamon can be, but most of them are around 0.9. So you'd multiply that by that and you get 45 ppm. Again, the form will do that for you if you don't understand that part. But the one thing you should note is that this just makes a standard syrup. If you want to make a stronger flavored syrup that doesn't use as much sugar, you'd increase this amount here. So you'd go 40 mils of your essence, and that would double this number here. So you'd end up with 100 milligrams per liter, or 100 ppm. And that's just by doubling this number. Now the reason you would want to do this is if this syrup is too sweet for a drink, you would actually, instead of using 25 mils, you'd use 12.5 mils, so basically half of 25. And then you'd end up back at 50 ppm. So it's infinitely adjustable in the sense that you just need to make a standard solution, vary how much essence you want to go into your syrup. The more essence, obviously the stronger the flavor. The stronger the flavor, the less syrup you need to use. So if you're making something like let's say a margarita or a daiquiri where you want to put a flavored syrup into it, so lime syrup to kind of enhance the flavor a little bit, you don't want to use 25 mils of simple syrup. That's just going to make it really sweet if you're going for something a little more delicate. So you'd use less simple syrup, but with a stronger flavor. And again, if this doesn't all make sense, check out the forum, or at least the next section. I'll go through the forum and how to use it. And it does all this and you actually visualize how your drink is being formulated. So let's go check it out. So let's talk about how this form works. And here you can see the form, and there's just some basic introduction and explanations of sections. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fill out this part, and this is just our essence volume. And the essence volume is whether you want to create a 240 ml or 8 ounce bottle size, or whether you want to make a liter of it, or any number will do, but this is how much essence you're going to make. And the only reason you pick this is depending on how much syrup you want to make eventually. But we will do what we did in the previous video, or in the previous section, and we'll just add 1000 ml. Next section is the beverage formulation. And so this is fairly easy. Again, you're just going to select your oil or extract, so let's say lemon oil. And in the oil or extract type, I put all the densities because this is set up for volume. If you're doing it by weight, I have another form coming, but if you're doing by volume, so if you're using a graduated cylinder or a little beaker, or even just a shot glass, this is where the conversion of density comes in, and we didn't talk about that, but it's important because if you don't factor in the density of your oils, your calculation can be off by 10 to 20% in some cases. So I put in basically most of the oils. If you're using an oil and it's not in there, just let me know, I'll add it. Oils are pretty standard. They have a fairly predictable range of densities, so you can just enter them. Now, in the previous video, we put in 25 mils, but I want to show you something, and so you can add a row. And then we can put in lime oil. And then you can put in 10 mils. And what that's going to do is now you have 25 mils of oil, as in the example, but you're using two different oils that are properly calculated for density. So the idea with this is if you're making, this would be kind of a Sprite or 7-Up type beverage, lemon lime, and you can factor those in. You don't need to just use one oil because some oils are, again, wintergreen, for example, is heavier than water, whereas orange oil is much lighter. So the difference between orange oil and wintergreen is about a 25% difference in your calculation. And that can be significant if you're making a drink. So the next row, which is formula strength, this is just an automatically calculated row. And it's designed that it just gives you an estimate of what's happening. So in here, my ppm estimate's kind of low. It's about half the amount. And again, that's because I put my lemon oil at 15 mils and I put my lime oil at 10 mils. But in the actual manual calculation, we used 50 mils. So what I can do is I can go up here, go back and change it to 30 and 20, which will come up to 50. And now we got a ppm estimate of 56. And again, it's not going to be 50 because there is a density calculation when you're using volume. And again, the reason why I developed this form is that if you don't do math or don't work in a lab, all of this can be kind of complicated, and if you're scared of doing this stuff, you're not going to make this stuff, but I guarantee you, you are capable of it. You just got to stick through, and using the form will help. So the next one is the total essential oil in grams. And so that is with the density factored into it. And then you can play around with the numbers up top. So you can increase them, and you'll see that the total essential oil will go up. So now we're at 50.27. So you can, again, keep changing things to get what you want. And then the ratio guide, it's basically a target between 4 and 10. This just tells you whether your syrup is really going to be too strong or too weak in your final drink. So you just kind of want it somewhere in that 4 to 10 range. But it is just a guide. As soon as you get better at developing this stuff, you will figure out how to work it. Now, the soda syrup part is basically step 3. And what we want to do is enter the volume of essence. So in the previous discussion, manual calculations, we did 25, and we did a volume of 2,000 mils. And now it doesn't really calculate anything for you at this point in time because you don't really need to know anything. Again, that's the row above it. Volume of syrup, this is going into your drink. So the beverage formulation, we're going to use 25, and I'm just going to modify the soda syrup to 20. That's more in line with what we were doing in the previous section. So volume of syrup, and you'll see that down below. So I'll just highlight it for you here. And the volume of your drink. So if it's an 8-ounce drink, you're looking at about 250 mils. It's actually 236 or something, roughly a cup. But I'm putting 250 here for the math. And if you just click anywhere, see, we ended up with 50 ppm. And that's because in the underneath the total essential oil in grams, so this section here, we made it basically the same as what we're calculating out. Now, if we modify this, and this is where the fun comes in. So let's say you want to do only a liter of syrup. When you hit enter, you're going to see your ppm goes to 101. And then if you change the volume of your essence, so you're making it more concentrated, you're going to go to 201. Now this is a touch intense, so now you want to, if you're making something like a daiquiri or anything where you wanted to use a small amount of syrup, if you put in just 5 mils of syrup, you can see you're back down to 40 ppm. And your formula is good, it's well done. And if your volume of your drink is only 120, you're only going to go up to 84 ppm. So as you work with this, you'll be able to see that within that range of 5 ppm to 250, maybe 300. Once you get above 200 for most things, again, other than lemon oil, it gets a touch intense and you're out of kind of that FDA guidance. And again, just because it's stronger or it has more essential oil doesn't actually mean you taste it more intensely. And one of the videos I'm going to do in the future is sugar and acid balance, because that's where a lot of intensity comes from, is the acidity of a drink and the sweetness of a drink, and bitterness as well. So again, it's just one part of the equation, but again, with this form, and again, this is just the first iteration of this form, as more people use it, and if you use it and have suggestions, I'm happy to incorporate them. One of the things I would like to do is in the beverage formulation part, I would like to get the ppm for each individual oil for you, so that you can create something that if the FDA guidance is 5 ppm for cinnamon, you'll know that you're working with that level there. That is going to be in a future version of this form, so hang on for that. Again, I'm not a computer programmer. I mean, I can do this stuff, but it takes me a little longer. So you'll see that you don't need any math skills to use this form. You just need to know your, how much essence you want to create. So if you created 240 mils, and then obviously if you're using the previous numbers, it gets a little bit high. So what you'll want to do is knock those back. So if we go 15 and 10, again, you're in that ratio guide of 4 to 10, and your ppm estimate's 118. Again, that's just based on a standard drink. So it will go down depending on what you're doing. And then if you basically follow along, you'll see that it's pretty solid. We're at 150 ppm, and that is kind of the lime concentration that the FDA recommends, and it's below the lemon concentration. So it's looking good from that point of view. And again, any questions, just let me know. If I haven't explained this clear enough, let me know. I will try to make a clearer video for you if you need to use this form. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.